Hey everybody, Chris the Up North Air Gunner, and this is the FX M4. So what is the M4? Well, ultimately what this is, it's taking all the feedback and the small changes and the big changes that we've been looking at changing with the FX Impact platform for years and basically baking it all into what we now have today as the M4. So I've actually had the opportunity to test two different variations of the M4 in the last month. This is the FX M4 in the 30 cal with a 700 millimeter sniper barrel. And I also had a early version of what they're calling the extended FX M4 now. What that extended version is, it's the 800 millimeter barrel kit that's straight from the factory. No custom barrels, no after parts you got to put together like I have been with some of these other guns. Straight from the factory, you can get the 800 millimeter extended version. And I tested that in 22 when I was out in Utah for the Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge. So I'm going to take you through my journey of what I've experienced over the last month with this. And, you know, when you first look at it, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of different changes, but the changes that are here are important and also very intentional about why they made them. So let's go through those right now. But the very first thing I want to talk to you about is this trigger. This trigger, you'll see it in the marketing language. It's like breaking a piece of glass. And I was trying to come up with an analogy now that I've been able to burn through hundreds of shots so far in the last few weeks with this. And it's almost like as if you were to take a very thin piece of wire that does not stretch, does not bend. So you basically take that very thin wire and when you pull, it just breaks and snaps and it's clean. It's hard to explain it, but it does feel like a breaking glass rod as you pull through it.
That is so crisp.
So what I love about this trigger is that there's really kind of three triggers in one. You have the precision competition trigger that we just talked about, like that very fine piece of glass rod that just snaps so perfectly. Or you can have the standard FX Impact trigger that we all know and love. Or you can actually move up the heaviness of that second stage, or if you even set up as the first stage trigger, that trigger break, you can actually make that a bit heavier than maybe like a 2-pound trigger for safety reasons, just for confidence reasons, that you know that you basically can get on your target, whether it's a game animal, being on the field, that having a little bit of a heavier second stage or a heavier trigger that's a preferable way. That's the way I like setting mine up. But in competition, now that I have the ability to move this on less than a pound in a matter of ounces, I am super excited about having that possibility. So of all the updates, all the upgrades, that trigger is number one. The next kind of big one for me is this top rail. I've been an FX Impact owner for years now. I think my very first one was a Mark II. And one of the things I noticed right away, when I stripped it down, I actually did a complete swap of all the rails, took all the parts off of it. One of the things I noticed is that top rail, that was pretty thin. And there was a little bit of flex in the system. And really, the reason behind like the backbone from Air Marksman and to create that hard top rail system was to basically get away from that flex. And now that they've been able to create a more rigid top rail system, but how they approach this design challenge, I think is pretty cool. Not only is it more rigid now, so all that flex is gone, they've done this with a sliding top rail, Picatinny top rail. And the reason why I like that is that there are some scopes that I have where I really just wish I could just move the whole rail back a little bit because like the way the rings were set up on it, or more specifically, I love the Element Optics Immersive Series. And with the Immersive Series, the whole way this system works is that it needs to be close to your eye. You have a very short eye relief. But in order to do that, you have to put, like a cantilever rail base on this thing. So now that the whole rail can move forward and back, this is going to be an awesome setup. Now, I'm actually thinking about using this for the speed competition at the upcoming Pyramid Cup. Now that I can actually move this immersive back to proper eye position. So I just loosen up these 4 screws, move that back, tighten them down, and now it becomes a perfect speed competition gun. And I can then move the cocking lever. It has an ambidextrous setup here. I personally like, as a right-handed shooter, having that left-handed cocking mechanism to be able to increase my speed and my engagement from target to target. So I think this is a really important feature. Now, there is a structural reason why I think this is a really great upgrade, is that if you've ever taken an FX Impact apart and took off the top rail, there were times that if you just don't torque it down right, or it could actually maybe slide on you a little bit, it could just get off kilter a little. And what this does by having this dovetail design here on the top, every single time you move this rail or take it off and put it on, you are 100% certain that that top rail is going to be perfectly on that center line of the entire platform. So this right here is a super critical piece to make sure you're not getting some weird windage things going on where you're going to crank your scope all the way over just to get it to zero. So that right there is a precision improvement, not only a structural rigidity improvement. So the next upgrade is the FX Amp Mark II Regulator. And what I love about this upgrade, a couple different things. One is I understood kind of conceptually why the FX Impact M3 had that dual regulator system. But for me, I just would rather have a more reliable single regulator. It's just one less thing that I have to worry about in my tuning and adjusting. And that's exactly what they've come out with this new regulator. And so what this is a brass piston regulator. And with that brass piston, not only gives you the a faster rebound rate, which is after each shot when your regulator it basically has your plenum fill back up to that proper pressure. So every single shot is the exact same velocity. It's got a super fast rebound rate. But then also for me, I like high power, I love pushing these guns as hard as they'll go. This factory regulator without any modifications, I don't have to get a third-party option. This will go up to 170 bar as covered by the warranty and as covered by the factory to allow this to go up to 170 bar, which means now I can get this extended kit so I can start pushing these heavy caliber slugs at 170 bar. That right there for me, guys, is a pretty big upgrade. The next thing I think that if I was to kind of rank all the updates, the next big one that I'm super excited about is the new magazine design. It may not seem like a big deal, but it quite honestly is. If you have ever used an FX Impact and sometimes like you get a little grime in there or you're shooting like a really heavy for caliber slug or a really heavy pellet, sometimes what happens is it wouldn't rotate shot to shot. And what happens is when you cock your next shot, you basically just drive fire because it didn't rotate. Well, they've redone the entire mechanism on the inside. And not only that, the entire magazine is actually made to hold heavy for caliber projectiles. And to prove this, I'm going to bring the camera over here so you can see this. I am now working with Corbin, and they sent me these awesome 42 grain 22 cal slugs. These things are absolutely enormous for 22 cal. The ballistic coefficient, let me just tell you, it is a very high number. It's probably the highest BC I've ever tested with a 22. I'm not ready to publish all my data on this, but let me tell you, it's a 42 grain 22 cal slug. This is carrying a lot of energy and a lot of ballistic coefficient downrange. And being able to shoot such a heavy for caliber slug, the previous magazine design just didn't allow for it. So they've done that for two different ways. One, having that mechanism to ensure that heavy for caliber slug will actually rotate shot to shot. But then also we have a grooved out top lid here. So that way you can actually put those in there. So that's pretty exciting because being able to shoot a hot rodded 800 millimeter 22 cal, we're going to be able to do some pretty awesome stuff with that. So anyway, that magazine, I would call that the next update that I think is pretty awesome about this. So let's talk about one of the updates I think is really cool. I personally, whenever I get any airgun, I have probably 2 or maybe 3 grips that I love that I will end up probably swapping onto this one. I'm kind of a grip snob. I just love the way certain grips fit in my hand. But I will tell you, this is probably the best OEM grip that I've ever felt. And what this is the new FX UG1. So the FX UG1's grip, it almost feels like a custom grip straight from the factory. What I love about this grip is it does have that larger palm swell that we see other manufacturers make. And the reason why that's important is that it fills in some of that negative space in your hand. And the least amount of movement that you can have in your trigger position, you want to make sure every single trigger pull, every single time is the exact same way. And that is part of that precision process, is that repeatability. And just having that ability to have that void and that big palm swell in there is great. The texture is awesome. I'd call this like a hard rubber. It's not like a soft rubber. It's not plastic. It's definitely a rubber kind of texture. It's got a nice stippling texture out here, so non-slip. Got finger grooves. And also what I like about it has this kind of like thinner neck area, but thicker palm swell. And what that does is it allows my thumb to lay naturally on the side of the grip. So I personally do not wrap my thumb. I actually have my thumb sitting on the side. And so, yeah, straight from the factory grip, it's probably the best I've ever seen. So those are the updates so far that I've had a chance to really walk through, use in the last month. Again, I've used this in 2 different versions. The 22 cal version, just a quick short story about the 22 cal. Very last minute hunting trip that I took when I was out at the Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge. I was like asking Justin, I had like an extra 3 days that I had to be in Utah for a meeting that I was going to. I was like, hey, Justin, there was that prairie dog place that you took me to a couple years ago. Any chance I could maybe go out there? He was like, absolutely. So he got me permission to go out there to this really cool secret prairie dog hunting spot that we've got there in Utah. And what was awesome about it is he let me borrow one of the 22 cal. It wasn't the 800 millimeter extended with the shroud, but it had the 800 millimeter barrel kit. So I went that out there. We did a quick 0 with the 34 grain sands. And man, that thing is just exactly what I would expect from that heavy twist liner for slugs in that 22 cal 800 millimeter kit. I've done a lot of testing with that exact same kit in the M3. It absolutely loves the Zan slugs, everything in that, like 34 to 40 grain weight range. What's awesome about that 800 millimeter barrel is you're able to basically just kind of crank it up to about like 150, 160 bar, crank out the power wheel, find a good 0, dial that in a little bit. And man, I'll tell you what, we were just drilled in prairie dogs out to like 180 yards. It was pretty awesome. So I only had to spend a little bit of time with that one. So what I really wanted to talk about with the M4 launch though, is I knew I was going to want this in 30 cal. So the reason why I got this in the 30 cal setup is that if you have gone down the slug rabbit hole like I have been for the last few years, guys, slugs are awesome. They're absolutely fun. When you get them tuned in perfectly, they're great. But man, there's nothing better than a perfectly tuned 30 cal FX liner based system, because whenever you're able to just drill that hole in hole at 50 yards and holding like less than 1 inch groups at 100. All right, so we got a pretty good velocity tune on here. Cranked it down to around 890. I was competing much faster than this. I was like up in the like 950, 960s. And I'm actually just doing a little bit of testing with these AEAs. See if I can slow them down a little bit, and notice that the BC is holding really good. So I was getting BCs kind of in that 0.075 to 0.08 with the 1 in 40 twist 600 millimeter barrel in the King, and this is the 700 millimeter barrel 1 in 40 twist, both 30 cal. So my standard deviation and extreme spread, that's acceptable. I like seeing it around 5 or less, 5 or 6, so that's pretty good. Over 10 shots, so that is a really good velocity tune. BC is holding. I'm not seeing any crazy fluctuations in that BC number. I'm not seeing it getting down into like to the 0.06s. It's right there in the 0.074, 075, 079. And so yeah, that BC is super stable. So yeah, so we're gonna do some harmonic tuning, and we're gonna do that by adding and removing the baffle stacks on the Yokozuna there. So all right, pretty good start. It's so easy to tune for. It's almost like just like the magic caliber. They call God's caliber the 30-06, right? And then good old M1 Garand and the Springfield 1903, the 30-06 was God's caliber. I honestly think that the 30 cal is honestly the benchrest God's caliber for just easy tuning, precision. So if you're just getting into this, if you just want to enjoy the platform as is, no monkeying, modifications, frustrations, just get this as a 30 cal pellet slinger. Get that 1 in 40 twist liner. And I'm going to tell you, you get JSB 44 grains or the FX 44 grains or some of these new pellets. You could thank me later, because your level of enjoyment is going to be at a level 10. So that's what I did. I got this set up. So the other reason being is for benchrest, I went down the rabbit hole of shooting the FX King, which is probably my absolute favorite rig right now that I've got on that wall. The FX King and the Saber Tactical chassis, I've been running that for competition for benchrest. It is absolutely awesome. But I will tell you, I found one flaw, and it's not a flaw of the system. It's just inherently that the magazine capacity size on the FX Dynamic, the FX King, the FX Panthera, you just cannot beat the huge magazine of an FX Impact. And at the Northeast Airguns Classic, I had zero problems with that lower capacity. The wind wasn't as bad, and so I didn't have to take as many sighters, and I ran through my cards, no problem, made the finals. It was fantastic. But I'll tell you what, reality sets in real quick in Utah when it comes to wind conditions, and you are literally burning through, and I'm not exaggerating, you could literally burn through 5 full magazines of pellets before you take a single scoring shot. And the reason being is you're just trying to figure out that wind, and so just by the time you think you get it figured out and you go up to that scoring target, now you're out of ammo. Having to do all of those magazine changes with the FX Dynamic, for me, it got a bit frustrating in Utah. And it was in that moment, I was like, did I make the wrong decision? Because I really was missing my FX Impact with the higher shot count in the magazine. That alone gives this a leg up over most any other bench rest gun, is because a lot of times you're going through those sighters, you all of a sudden you see it, right? It's almost like you have a vision of, okay, now it's time for me to go up into my scoring target. You do not want to be out of ammo, having to stop, change ammo or change magazines, do a magazine reload. You don't want to have to do that. Once you figure it out, you want to go right to that scoring target. With the FX Impact, we can do that with the higher magazine capacity. So, just some of the pellet testing that I've done. I just really want to run through some numbers here real quick. I will tell you right out of the box, basically with very little tuning, I just set it at like 880, 890 feet per second using the AEA pellets that I've been using in competition all year long. I'm literally just putting one whole groups at 50 yards, just right out of the box. And on these 3 shots, we're just going to basically do the same point of aim on the exact same one. We're not going to hold for wind. We're just going to kind of see what kind of wind deflection we're getting. So, because that wind is picking up pretty good. So, might be a pretty good test to see how well these pellets deflect the wind. All right, I'll call that test pretty darn good. So again, I was not holding for wind. I was literally just holding on the bullseye every shot here. Same point of aim. And you have to remember, when you're holding for wind or you're playing the wind in bench rest, even that little bit amount of wind is going to blow you around. But you have to remember, the ballistic coefficient of these pellets is literally almost double than that of like the 44 grains. So if we pull out our little handy dandy Donnie FL coin here, and we just actually put that, cover the group here, but just showing you what those pellets are capable of as far as wind deflection. Sub MOA, this one, we had that one leak out. If we actually go to cover up the center, we'll have to measure that with ballistic X, and then this one, right at an inch, we'll have to measure that one. But anyway, again, not holding for wind. I only had those 2 fall out at 100 yards. So there we are at 100. A little bit of a wind corridor here, but yeah, pretty good test. All right, so now we know what it's doing here. We have to remember, this is actually, the 9 ring on the bench rest card is basically the size of this. Okay, 8 ring. Actually, the 8 ring might be a little bit bigger than that. I'll have to check the measurements. But all right, so we're gonna do a full magazine dump on this guy. We're just gonna hold center mass. We're not gonna hold for wind or anything, just to show you what the pellets are gonna do. See what we can do with a full mag dump. Here we go. Got a pretty good group here on that paddle. I'm just holding center mass every single time. And that was a full magazine dump. So, I mean, that's pretty darn good at 100. Yeah, I'll take it. So the big news of the year, guys, the scores, I think on average, if I just did some rough math, on average, they're going up between 5 to 10 points on average higher than years past. We have better guns, we have better technology, we have more research on barrels. But I think my personal opinion is the biggest change in 2024 has been these really heavy pellets. And the AEA 50 grain pellet it's the secret sauce, guys. So all you other competitive benchrest shooters are probably going to hate me for putting it out there, which means we're all going to have a really hard time finding these pellets probably for months to come. But the 50 grain AEA pellet is a BC G1 consistently, and I've shot this across different liners. I've shot this across different air guns, different manufacturers of air guns. In this liner, I'm getting 0.075 to 0.078. Now, what that means, why do those numbers mean anything? Because right now I'm just throwing data at you, right? Where this matters and what that means is if we go back 3 years ago and the pellets we were using, the typical 44 grain pellet, if you compare that pellet, let's say at 900 feet per second as compared to 900 feet per second with this heavy for caliber 0.075 BC pellet, the difference between those at 100 yards, let's say with like a 5 to 7 mile an hour crosswind, the difference is literally 2 inches of wind drift with everything else being the same. What that means is with that heavy for caliber pellet, I could literally just pull it on the bullseye and squeeze off 25 shots for a score without even holding for wind, where that 44 grain pellet, you are chasing 2 inches of difference. That 2 inches of difference is the entire diameter of the 8 ring. And if you've been shooting in competition, you'll know falling outside of that 8 ring, especially at RMAC, hell, falling outside of the 9 ring at RMAC, you're pretty much done. So in competition, if you fall outside of that 8 ring, you might as well just kind of pack it up and you're practicing at that point, because these scores are getting so high that you got to keep it within that 8 ring and really ideally within that 9 ring. So what that equates to in the terms of score is if you kept everything in the 8 ring and just shot 8s for 25 targets, that's a 200. If you only did 9s, you hit 9s 25 times, that's a 225. Guys, we are up in the 230s consistently across 3 cards, 225 to 230s across 3 cards, and that is what it takes to be a high-level competitor, and we need every advantage we can. So those AEA 50 grain pellets, and when Ben told me about these months ago, back in like January, February of this year, I hoped nobody would find out, but now most people know, and if you're just now watching this, if you're just getting into all of this, if you can find those pellets somewhere, get those in the FX M4 with the pellet liner. I'm telling you, you will love this platform. You're going to love being an air gunner. Again, if you've gotten frustrated with slugs, come on back to the purist, guys. Get back into a pellet. Just go back to the good old days of shooting pellets. Get yourself some of those pellets and use one of these pellet liners. Cleanse your soul. You always go back to slugs. You can go back down that rabbit hole again, but just cleanse your soul and start shooting pellets again. Make pellets great again, guys. So that is my review of the M4. I love it. Again, it is a historic, iconic, quintessential air gun from FX. I am super excited about what this is going to do. I know that this is not the end of innovation for FX. FX is constantly working on things. So, but what they've released in this, I think these were the correct improvements that needed to happen. And I'm super excited about using this in the upcoming competitions and hunting with this fall. So there it is, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Take care.